Hey guys, I never made a formal video about Dune 2, which is kind of crazy because I saw it 3 times in theaters, but it's one of my favorite movies in a long time. And a huge reason for that is the dialogue, which is also funny because director Denis Villeneuve has said he doesn't really like using dialogue that much. He likes showing. But the dialogue that is there is very impressive, and I wanted to go over it and what I considered to be Dune 2's best scene, Paul meeting the Fremen leaders.
I'm pointing the way!
It's an incredible few minutes, and while it may be simple, there are so many subtle writing techniques being used to make it as good as it is. There's a lot going on with the dialogue here, and I wanted to really unpack what's happening for all you aspiring writers and fans out there. For those of you who are new here, I am Alex, a professional novel and script editor, along with being an author myself, and this is the latest entry in my Dialogue Dive series. If you like what you hear and want to hire me on yourself, my website link will be in the description along with prices and services. But for this video, how this will go is that I will play a section from Dune 2's scene, and then pause it to break down the noteworthy writing techniques when they occur. If you want to watch the full scene first without my commentary, I will include a link in the description below. So, without further waiting, let's jump into it.
Maddy, only tribe leaders can speak. If you wish to share your voice, you must take his place by defeating him and returning his water to the well.
You think I'm stupid enough to deprive myself of the best of us?
So, to start, one of the most important elements of this scene from a narrative perspective is how the dialogue aligns with the constructed theme. Theme is the messaging of a story, what it wants you to learn or take away from it. And for Paul specifically, a theme that revolved around him is identity. The entire movie is basically a back and forth pull for who Paul will become and what it means for everyone else.
If I go south, I might lose you.
You will never lose me. Paul Atreides. Not as long as you stay who you are.
The reason I bring this up is because the theme of Paul's identity is closely centered on a battle between his Atreides identity and his Fremen Muad'Dib identity. And the dialogue delivered here, while extremely subtle, immediately shows us how this scene will play out. Listen to what he says one more time.
If you wish to share your voice, you must take his place by defeating him and returning his water to the well.
You think I'm stupid enough to deprive myself of the best of us?
Now, listen to this dialogue from Dune 1.
You have my resignation.
You would deprive us of your talents at this time.
Sire, my honor demands.
They tried to take the life of my son!
That is Leo Atreides, Paul's father, giving the exact same sentiment through dialogue.
You think I'm stupid enough to deprive myself of the best of us?
You would deprive us of your talents at this time.
Sire,
I find this super cool because what's happening here in the scene with Paul is essentially foreshadowing for the theme that will be solidified later. Themes, especially those delivered through dialogue, are built through repetition, and this dialogue shows Paul's Atreides side shining through. In every well-made story, there's an internal conflict and an external conflict. The internal conflict is what a character personally deals with, their growth, their development, their evolution. The external conflict is who they are fighting against in reality. While the eventual war scenes are the climax of Paul's external conflict, this scene with the leaders is the climax of Paul's internal conflict, where he will decide once and for all what identity he will take. So it's a beautiful thing that while we are on the edge of our seats in suspense, the dialogue is already showing us what direction the scene will take. It's great stuff.
Take my life, Usul. It is the only way.
I'm pointing the way!
Slow down.
So this is super cool. One of the things that I love most about Dune 2 is how the writing is so confident in itself that it can be incredibly understated. Pretty much every fantasy or sci-fi writer watching can take a huge lesson here on how sometimes less is more. You don't always need huge paragraphs of exposition. tiny, confident phrases is all you need sometimes. This small line right here is actually what I'm referencing.
Slow down.
The reason I love this so much is because it's another execution of a subtle narrative technique, power scaling. And through it, additional suspense is created as well. Paul's mother across the entire film has basically turned into, let's be honest, a tiny god. Jessica can see into the future, see back in time, and can have full conversations with her unborn child. She is portrayed as a literal holy figure. We understand her narratively as the single most powerful, knowledgeable individual in the fiction. Maybe not like politically, but certainly on an individual level. She is the bar by which all other supernatural characters are scaled against. And because of this, we take her words seriously. So when she tells Paul,
Slow down.
we start to get worried, because if Jessica thinks Paul is overstepping, then we should too. Through that one tiny bit of dialogue, the tension for the scene raises even higher, because if Jessica is worried, we are worried. But the true beauty is that Jessica's fears are wrong, and that Paul is in full control. And this is because Paul has more power and more sight than Jessica. We see Paul drink the water of life, we saw him survive a trial that no man should live, and now we are seeing the consequences of what that means. By Paul having control over a situation that not even Jessica is confident in, we know him to be even more powerful than Jessica. He has access to knowledge she doesn't, and it's not because of long explanations that we know this, but because of one little line.
Kaubakakalikakari! Hurai! Jahaish!
I'll point this out very quickly. We are now moving into the part of the dialogue built around solidifying a feel of mysticism. The Dune movies are in a subgenre of science fiction commonly referred to as astro-tribalism. It's the depiction of aesthetically tribal people who still make use of advanced technology. The most famous recent depiction of this is from the Horizon games, but the subgenre has been around for a long, long time. The reason I get into this is because astro-tribalism is often paired with mysticism and supernaturalism. It is a narrative way of combining futurology and spiritualism. But spiritualism and tribalism, at least in a narrative sense, are highly dependent upon being unknown, or at least mysterious. Essentially, every major, successful depiction of a tribal people is based in the exploration of new ideas, cultural practices, and beliefs. If we knew everything about them, they wouldn't be interesting in a story, but we still need to know enough to feel invested. This is exactly what's going to happen here with Paul's dialogue.
Kaubakakalikakari! Hurai! Jahaish!
Everything he says is going to give you just enough info for you to be in wonder of him, but also be mysterious and indecipherable enough to keep you from gaining a comfort with him. This type of execution of dialogue is incredibly difficult and requires high skills in poeticism and prose-based language. It is meant to evoke feelings rather than specifics. Your heart is meant to be grabbed rather than your mind, which is why it works so well with spiritualism, which functions in the same way.
Do you think you could have a chance? Isnata Jahash. Shihochausich.
Notice how Paul is switching back and forth between English and the Fremen language. Very cool detail. It signals his mastery over both sides and his confidence in them. He is no longer conflicted about who he is or what he will become. He is complete in his duality.
Shizihik ishitam shapito edemashili. Lukazash vadzich kalagash. Uzulfa bit nair gevi barta wadzich. Jura hagari imashnerilia kala jeske obit. Harda haud. O erle chausi jura ha abzir sihi secure tu femni. Dune.
Is that okay?
This dialogue is our first glimpse into Paul's new powers, and it's great because the exposition also serves the narrative. It's hyper efficient. Instead of explaining the effects of Paul's transformation in the water of life, we get a demonstration of his abilities, of him looking into the past. He not only convinces this man, which furthers the conflict of the scene, but Paul starts to convince us as the audience as well. We now have to consider if he is the god that the Fremen actually believe him to be. And that wonder means the narrative has already accomplished its goal.
Marty.
Und faisi facis ruzam! Tikasha kera zulhu! Hi anzadaha! Chimbi hu crash!
Mati.
Marty. Geshisha chi.
Shidgim shari.
I love this line for so many reasons. For those of you who know Dune, Green Paradise is a literal place that the Fremen believe in, but even if you didn't know the lore, it still works perfectly. His promise is a mystical, undefined, idyllic land for his followers. It's the most messianic language you can possibly use. Again, the dialogue is meant to be poetic and spiritual, knowable but unknowable at the same time. It hits a middle ground, and it harkens back to a hyper-famous Western religious story, the Hebrew Israelites wandering through the desert in search of the Promised Land. Dune's use of mysticism and spiritualism and religiosity is used here to build up Paul, and it's honestly phenomenal.
Shuma Hoki.
This is my father's ducal signet.
I am Paul Muad'Dib Atreides, Duke of Arrakis! Erudi Dina Heshidani, Nelisan al-Gaib, Rui Dimenaruk, Ashidi! Lisan al-Gaib!
And here is the climax of our scene, and perhaps the most pivotal moment in the movie. Paul once again goes from Fremen
Shidgim shari.
to English.
This is my father's ducal signet.
But it's what he proclaims in English that's so important. In Dune 1, Leo Atreides gives Paul his ducal signet, telling Paul that he needs to find his way.
I found my own way to it. Maybe you'll find yours.
In Dune 2, after Paul had become fully accepted by Chani and the Fremen, he took off his ducal signet, setting aside his Atreides heritage to fully embrace his Fremen identity.
Father, I found my way.
But here, at the climax of Paul's internal struggle, he redons his ducal signet and proclaims himself as Paul Muad'Dib Atreides, claiming both sides of his identity, 100% Fremen and 100% Atreides. This, again, harkens back to famously established Western religious imagery, where Jesus Christ proclaims himself to be 100% man and 100% God, a flawless divine combination occupying the same space. This climax is both euphoric and tragic, because even though the Fremen have a leader to be unified under, Paul now holds a distinctly different personality and sees himself as above the Fremen, as their leader, the Duke of the Outworlders and the natives alike, which betrays everything he once told Chani. Dialogue of this scene, along with the other creative choices, constructs in my eyes a literal perfect scene. Everything is efficient, there is no waste, and every line contributes towards the external conflict of fighting the Harkonnens and the internal conflict of defining Paul's identity. This is how confident, thematic storytelling is done, and I'm so happy that I'm able to geek out with you guys over it. Anyway, thanks for watching all the way until the end. Again, if you want to check out my website to be able to hire me on for your books and scripts and novels, check it out with the link below. If you really want to be a homie, support on Patreon, or go and check my books so you can read them yourself. Anyway, thanks for watching all the way until the end, and I'll talk to you all again soon.